All right, we are back and we are going to look a little bit at using the same tool, Curves tool, adjustment layer. Adjustment layer. It's not a tool, although in some ways anything you can use to do something is sort of a tool, like Elon Musk. So we are going to go ahead and look at using that curves adjustment layer to tweak color. So this is still in that same handout 9. And here I am in the Photoshop working with this file. This file is, I don't know, it's called demo wrong white balance tiff1.tiff. That is a dumb name, and I will fix it before I give it to you because I'm already ashamed looking at it. So here's a file. It's a little bit too warm, right? Sort of like Antarctica. And we are going to fix it being a little bit too warm using a curves layer. Now, normally if you're shooting a raw file, don't do this shit here. Like, come on, right? Like, go into that raw file, adjust the white balance there. That is the best place to do it, right? For the homework, we have a raw file that is the equivalent of a processed out file. And one of the things you will do is you will try to fix the color in the processed out file, and you will try to fix the color in the raw file, and perhaps you will learn that do it in the raw file. But curves are a way that you can adjust color. You may find yourself needing to do that. You may find yourself working with a file in Photoshop, working with a layer in Photoshop where it is not a raw file, or where you need to try and blend its color to match something else in the picture, right? So I've got two layers, they're in Photoshop. This one is, I don't know, a composited nose from someone else, just to pick an example. And I want to try and blend it to the color of everything around it. I'm not going to go back into a raw file and futz around with it there and sort of like try to hold in my mind what it looks like in Photoshop. No, I'm going to go ahead, open that curves layer, and make that color adjustment in Photoshop. That's what I'm going to do. So here we are. We've got this file. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't know, basic layer management stuff. Duplicate layer. Okay, pixel layers. Layards. Goodness gracious. And adjustment layers. Why the heck not? Okay, turn off that. Whoops, wrong one. Turn off the original one, turn on the main one. Go into my adjustments layers here, drop in a curves layer, and I'm going to call it overall color adjustment. You know what? That's not specific enough. Overall is good. There we go. All right, so what is it doing? Fixing the warm white balance. What part of the image is it doing it to? The whole thing. So here we are. We've got this image, and oh man, pickled jalapenos, so good. I would like to go in and try and fix the color. Now, here in my layers, normally, right, we're like, make things lighter, make things darker. Oh, by the way, one thing, if you go ahead and do some like dumb things, those of you who are like, oh, it's so cool. No, don't do it. You can go down here to the bottom of the layers palette. There is a little reset button. Blessed relief. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to, right, by default I'm working with RGB. I'm working with all the channels at once. So I make all of them lighter, all of them darker. You can, however, go into the individual channels and just work with one sort of part of your RGB file. So I'm going to go to blue, right, because blue is the opposite of warm yellowy stuff. I'm going to go there and drag that around a little bit, right? So I'm going to bring the blue up just a smidge. And gosh, I have to say that looks better already. This now feels a little bit reddish, so I'm going to go into red and pull that down a little bit, right? Just a tiny, tiny bit. Less, I have to say, than looks like in the handout. Okay, well, maybe that's a little bit better. And that looks pretty good. If I go down here to that adjustment layer and turn it on and off, whew, oh yeah, gosh, that's better. So if I go back to my RGB adjustment layer, you'll see now that I have these two kind of like twang, right? Like sort of like waveforms off of that rubber band, right? I don't know. Where's this metaphor going? Who can tell? But we can see that those colors are outside of that original diagonal line. That's telling you, hey man, you've been adjusting things in those individual channels. This is helpful in case you forget that you've done that and you're like, wait, why is everything not look totally normal? And you're like, okay, that's right, I forgot I did that. So that's pretty good. Other things that, wow, this is actually really short. I should have just done this with the other video clip. Other things that we can think about, if you go up here to the eyedropper tool, right? So there's a couple of things here. So one of them, which I think per the handout I should have mentioned in the previous clip, is this little finger guns thing. You can click on that and it will allow you to go in and it'll tell you, right, if I click and drag up and down, it will say, oh, okay, this is the part of the tonal curve that you've clicked on, right? So again, when I look at this, I'm like, I don't know, this looks black. Is it all the way down here or is it way up here, right? If I grab that finger and move that around, you'll see there's a little circle bopping up and down on that rubber band that is telling me where in the tonal curve or where in my histogram, what sort of like level of brightness I'm currently mousing over, and were I to click on it, it would then adjust exactly that part up and down, right? And if I've got a bunch of other points in here, right, it's still going to be adjusting that part of the curve, right? Does this look good? No, man, that looks like garbage. So that's one tool, right? Is that tool useful? I don't know. Certainly wasn't useful right there. The other thing we've got here are these three eyedroppers, right? So the middle one is gray. And if I go here and I'm going to just temporarily, I'm going to reset that adjustment. I'm going to grab that gray one and come over here and click on something. And what am I going to click on? I'm going to click on something that I think should be a neutral gray, right? So here I'm like, oh, hey, I happen to have this color chart in here, right? So I know that's a neutral gray. I click on that. It is 100% a neutral gray. If I were to click on this red, right? If I say, hey, this is a neutral gray, and Photoshop is like, okay, let me try to adjust it to make it neutral, right? Okay, yeah, no, doesn't work. The gray, it's going to say, okay, you've clicked on this thing. I can tell numerically this is like a little bit more this, a little bit less that. I'm going to try and bring those in so that it is indeed a neutral gray. And whatever that means for the rest of the image, it is what it is, right? So if I look here now at my RGB curve, you can see that I have that like twang, right, on that rubber band. And each of those channels, red, green, and blue, is a little bit off of that original datum. If you go around and click on other things that also seem like they should be neutral, oops, pardon me. Right, you'll notice that you do get fairly different results. You'll get more unexpected results with things that are right at the edge of whiteness and blackness. right? So if I'm all the way at something that's like 253, 250, right, out of 255, don't ask. Okay, do ask. It's because there's 256 values, which is a power of 2. 0 counts as one of the values, so it's 0 to 255, and that's why. You're welcome. So as I click on that, it looks pretty white, right? But it may be clipping on one channel or another, right? So it may be pretty white and the blue channel is clipped or the green channel is clipped. And because one of them is sort of off the charts, we sort of lose any like relative information in that data, right? If we're trying to bring all the channels down to be the same value, which is what it means to have it be a neutral gray, if one of them is off the charts, then we don't know how much to bring it down, right? Because the distance from what it should be, right, from the other 3 channels, we've lost it. Because once it goes to 255, if we go one more than that, it's still 255. So if the yellow channel was super clipped and it really should be 270, right, we can't tell that it's, you know, whatever, 30 off, because all we can see is that it's at 255. Anyway, that is to say, don't use very bright things or very dark things to try and white balance. It won't work well. But we can click on this gray thing, that works great. We can click on this background, that works okay. We can click on things that are relatively neutral-ish, right? Most of the time you don't have a color chart in there. But clicking on the silver, right, it's not a very bright value on this camera. Yeah, you know, not terrible, right? Why is this off? I don't know. Maybe it's off because it's not actually all that white. Maybe it's off because it's getting some reflection from there. Maybe it's off because it's a TIFF and not a RAW file, and so it just doesn't have the greatest color information and the widest range of possible things to be able to adjust from. But there you go. That's how you do it. You're going to do that for the homework. So if we look at what that homework is for assignment 3, there are some files in here for you to use, color files and exposure files. And what you're going to be doing in assignment 3, go ahead and full screen. You're going to be taking these files where you have something that is in the exposure thing, too light, too dark, and accurate. And you're going to be taking the too light and the too dark, using a curves layer to try and bring those in to match basically the accurate one. Probably easiest if you open the accurate and whatever you're working on in Photoshop, right? So you can kind of look at both of them and eyeball it. I think that that makes sense. So you'll add a curves adjustment layer to make the light one look like the normal one and the dark one look like the normal one. With the 3 color ones, right, you're going to try to adjust the yellow color cast and the slightly less bad color cast using a curves layer, right? Again, it's not a raw file. That really severe color cast, you may not be able to do much to actually fix it. The one that's minor, you probably should be able to do it. Then lastly, you're going to take the 2 raw files directly into Photoshop, right? Not through Lightroom. I'll show you how to do that in a sec. And adjust the color in that Adobe Camera Raw window. So when we do that, right, we'll be working with this raw file. It'll be a much better adjustment. And then you're going to save that. Now, when you save that, you're not actually going to save it. You're going to like commit to that adjustment by hitting done, right? So in the Adobe Camera Raw window, you're going to make that adjustment to the raw file. Then you're going to hit done. That is going to save the state of your raw file as you have just adjusted it. That way, when I open it, I'll be able to see what you do. So let's take a look at how we would do that. I'm going to do it with a demo file because I'm not going to do it on your homework. I'm not going to do it. Here we go. Here is, there's that underlying original one. And here, oh my gosh, is that welcome. Thank you. No, I don't want to learn more. I've already learned everything I need to learn, okay? School's for losers. Here we are in Adobe Camera Raw, right? Depending on which version of Camera Raw you have, it may look a little bit less goofy. Adobe Camera Raw is a way of interacting with RAW files that underlies things like Adobe Lightroom, any of the Adobe products. This is the sort of standalone Adobe Camera Raw interface. Again, I do all of my Adobe Camera Raw processing through Lightroom, so I don't actually deal with this. But it's important for you to know how it works. So here we are in Adobe Camera Raw. What we want to do is go to Color. Over here on the right side, there it is. Why does it not say white balance? I don't know, man. I guess that was too complicated. So color, there is a little white balance clicker. There is an eyedropper. Oh my gosh. Boop. Right? That is neutral as fuck. Again, you can use that on other things that you think of as being neutral. And see how it works, right? I do it on that little cup. Frankly, it looks a lot better. When we did it in the TIFF, that did not work very well. Maybe it was just a file, right? This was a slightly different white balance to start out with. And again, maybe it was the fact that it's a very light tone. You may have some clipping in that non-raw file. Okay, so we've done that. That looks great, blah, blah, blah. You could go in and mess with these a little bit if you felt so inclined. And what we are going to do now is go down here to the bottom, and instead of hitting open, which would bring this into Photoshop and it would cease being a raw file, we are just going to hit done. All right, so now if I go, ignoring the fact that this looks almost the same, because it's the other version, TIFF version of that same file, if I go back here and open that DNG again, right, it reflects the adjustments we had made. So with the DNG in Adobe Camera Raw, if you make those adjustments and then hit done rather than cancel, which would discard the adjustments, or open, which would open it as a PSD and leave your raw file alone, we're just going to hit done, and then you can go in and rename that actual file however it is I ask for it in the homework. So that's the only thing that's a little weird in that. Otherwise, it is pretty standard working with curves layers. You're going to turn in 4-layered 8-bit Pro Photo RGB PSD files titled like that. Plus the 2 DNG files that are the raw color files corrected with Adobe Camera Raw, and then you hit done, and then you rename them. You don't need to turn in the reference files, right? Remember, there's like a too light, a too dark, and a good one, to one color, to some other color, and a good one. You don't need to turn in the good ones because you didn't do anything to them. So just those 4 edited PSDs with layers, all that stuff, don't flatten them. And then the raw color files that are adjusted in Adobe Camera Raw, hit done, rename them, and turn those guys in. All right, that is the homework and that little bit of color, and enjoy yourself. Holler at me if you have any questions.